Silver Chair, the penultimate book in the Chronicles of Narnia, the second to last book. In this book again we see Eustace and Jill going to Narnia. The story in a nutshell: so Aslan has called Eustace and Jill to Narnia for the first time. Well, Eustace for the second time, I guess it is, as we also saw him in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But he has called them to Narnia to save, to seek, and to rescue the lost prince. So this takes place during the time of Caspian the Seafarer, Caspian being the king in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, who sailed to the utter east with Eustace and Lucy and Edmund. And Caspian's son, Prince Rilian, has been lost for a couple decades now in this book, and so Aslan has called Eustace and Jill to Narnia to rescue the lost prince. And the means by which that they are to rescue the prince is not so much in Aslan being directly involved, as we saw like within Prince Caspian or Magician's Nephew, for example, but the means by which that Prince Rilian is going to be rescued is that Aslan gives Jill 4 signs, the signs by which he is going to guide them along their journey to find the prince, to rescue the prince. Yes, Aslan could obviously step in, but the signs are the things that are going to be the guideposts along the way. They are going to act in lieu of Aslan being there. He's giving Jill and Eustace the signs to follow. They are to recite the signs to themselves every day, to think about them as they're going down to bed at night, to think about them in the morning, to remember the signs. That's what Aslan calls them to remember the signs as they go through the story. So this book, I wanted to look at those signs, but then also at the character of Puddleglum. Puddleglum is an interesting character in all the books of Narnia. He, as we're introduced to him in the book, we see that he is a very pessimistic character. Let me read you one thing right off the bat. One of the things that I noted down in reading the book. Yes, I did jot them down in the front of the book, but then I subsequently copied them over to paper, just for ease of reference. First thing I wanted to point out was his statement later on in the book. As you can see, it's later in the book, but it kind of sums up his character, I think. He says, "I'm a chap who always likes to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it." So as we go through the book and we see Puddleglum's character, yes, we find that's true. He is a chap that likes to know the worst. Maybe not to know the worst, but to infer the worst, or to think the worst of things. He's a very pessimistic character. And I can identify a lot with Puddleglum. Maybe I'm not pessimistic to the degree that he is, but I do find myself looking at life and situations that happen in life in the worst terms sometimes. I think, well, what could be the worst thing that happens here? And then try to put the best face I can on it. If we know the worst, well, then we won't be disappointed when the worst doesn't happen. So it's kind of a modus operandi for me through life that I've found. Obviously, maybe not the best approach, but it's a kind of it's a personality that I have, and obviously Puddleglum is much the same. He looks at things in the worst lens and hopes for the best. So that's kind of a summary statement, but let's also look at the introduction to Puddleglum. Now, another interesting thing about Puddleglum is we don't see him in the book until chapter 4, I think it is. Chapter 4 is called itself, chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Puddleglum. And then, I guess too, I should add that he steps away from the scene before even the end of the book. The book starts with Aslan calling Jill and Eustace into Aslan's country. He meets with them face to face there, and then the book wraps up in the end, meeting with them again face to face in Aslan's country, and Puddleglum, he comes on the scene after the fact, and then he leaves before they meet Aslan again. And I find that interesting too, is that we don't know that whether Puddleglum has ever even met Aslan in real life. We don't know if he's ever seen him face to face, spoken with him, which also adds to his character, I think, as we'll see. He is a man of great faith. Yes, he's pessimistic, but he is a marshwiggle, not a man, who really trusts in Aslan, who trusts in the signs that Aslan has given Jill. We don't know that he's ever, interacted with Aslan. Yet despite that fact, he inherently trusts and believes in Aslan, has confidence in the signs, and I think that speaks a lot to his character. So we're going to look at the introduction to Puddleglum. So Jill and Eustace are flown to where he lives in the dead of night. It's all dark. It's well past bedtime. They are tired and worn out, and they're flown there on the backs of the owls. The owls are calling for Puddleglum, and it says, "For a long time there was no reply. Then a long way off, a dim light appeared and began to come nearer, and with it came a voice. 'Owls ahoy!' it said. 'What is it? Is the king dead? Has an enemy landed in Narnia? Is it a flood or dragons?'" So here, the very first words out of Puddleglum's mouth that we see as readers reflect his pessimistic character. When the light reached them, it turned out to be that of a large lantern. Jill could see little of the person who held it. He seemed to be all legs and arms. The owls were talking to him, explaining everything, but she was too tired to listen. She tried to wake herself up a bit when she realized that they were saying goodbye to her, but she could never afterwards remember much, except that sooner or later she and Scrub were stooping to enter a low doorway, and then, oh thank heavens, were lying down on something soft and warm, and a voice was saying, again, Puddleglum's pessimism coming through, "There you are, best we could do. You'll lie cold and hard, damp too, I shouldn't wonder. Won't sleep a wink, most likely, even if there isn't a thunderstorm or a flood, or the wigwam doesn't fall down on top of us." So yes, we as readers are introduced to the fact that Puddleglum is, a doleful person in life, expecting the worst, obviously, hoping for the best, expecting the worst. And I'll also look at the very last scene with Puddleglum in it, and we see him going out on the same note as well. Not going out; they're taking their departure from him. "Goodbye, dear Puddleglum," said Jill, going over to the marshwiggle's bed. "I'm sorry we called you a wet blanket." "So am I," said Eustace. "You've been the best friend in the world." "I do hope we'll meet again," added Jill. "Oh, not much chance of that, I should say," answered Puddleglum. "I don't reckon I'm likely to see my old wigwam again either. And that prince, he's a nice chap. Do you think he's very strong? Constitution ruined from living underground, I shouldn't wonder. Looks like the sort that might go off any day." "Oh, Puddleglum," said Jill, "you're a regular old humbug. You sound as doleful as a funeral. I believe you're perfectly happy. And you talk as if you're afraid of everything. Well, really, you're as brave as a lion." The highest compliment probably that could be paid someone in Narnia to call them as brave as a lion, because of course Aslan being the lion, an inherent bravery, I suppose you could say. And I think as I went through the book and I looked at Puddleglum as a character, and his like as mentioned, his faith, his dependency, his confidence in Aslan and in the signs, that bravery that comes out in those instances. Yes, obviously, because of that faith in Aslan and the signs, we can see that he is as brave as a lion. So I wanted to look at Puddleglum's character, as I mentioned, in respect to the signs, to his faith, and then in comparison to maybe the lack of faith that we see in Jill and in Eustace. So I have a few passages written down in which that quality of Puddleglum is called out. So the first one is when they are well on their way of the journey. They are traveling. They've been probably traveling across the moorlands of northern Narnia to seek for the lost prince. They've probably been traveling for some time now, days and days at least. And think about the fact that they're out on the open moors of northern Narnia. Winter is coming on, so they're probably cold. Dealing with cold temperatures, maybe snow. In this scene, we will see snow. But cold temperatures on the moor, out in the open, the exposed, flat country, hilly country of northern Narnia and Ettin's Moor. Constantly dealing with probably cold wind. Not very comfortable sleeping arrangements, sleeping on the ground probably in a makeshift tent or maybe even a lean-to. Eating what they can find on the way, whether it's roast fowl or whatever I think it says in the book. So this is the scene, that this is what they've been traveling through. Beforehand, they have met the woman of the Green Kirtle and the Black Knight, and the woman mentions to them, "Look, you're traveling north. Please stop at the castle of the gentle giants. They will provide you with comfortable beds and hot baths and wonderful food to eat." And bringing that into a situation where they're probably not accustomed to sleeping outdoors and living a rugged life like this, yes, you can obviously think, oh, that sounds wonderful. Let's try to get there. Let's try to get to this castle of Harfang and have these comfortable things. And within that little scene, although I didn't really think about it at the time, within that scene though, you've got to believe that kind of triggered Eustace and Jill to think, oh, this is what we want to try to achieve now. And they forget about the signs. They forget about the fact that we're supposed to be searching for the lost prince. And yet now they're focusing on being comfortable in Harfang. I think you see that, as the story plays out. Maybe we don't see that right off the bat, that little seed that was planted of thought in their mind, planted there, but it's probably there. So the scene now is them traveling. It's getting dark. They're traveling, in this cold and harsh environment. The wind is howling. A snowstorm is coming upon them, and they are going through the city of the ruined city of giants, and in this city there are little trenches that they found that they are able to go down into and get out of the wind a little bit, and they're just you're kind of exploring these trenches at the time. They don't think much of them. They're just exploring them at the time. And it says here, "It was dreadful to be out on top again," meaning up out of the trenches now. Down in the trenches, the little slits of trenches, their ears had almost begun to thaw. They had been able to see clearly and breathe easily and hear each other speak without shouting. It was absolute misery to come back into the withering coldness. And it seemed hard when Puddleglum chose at that moment for saying, "Are you still sure about those signs, Pole? What's the one we ought to be after now?" "Oh, come on, bother the signs," said Pole. "Something about someone mentioning Aslan's name, I think. I'm jolly well not going to give a recitation here." As you can see, she had gotten the order wrong. That was because she had given up saying the signs every night. She still really knew them if she troubled to think, but she was no longer so pat in her lesson as to be sure of reeling them off in the right order at a moment's notice and without thinking. Puddleglum's question annoyed her because deep down inside she was already annoyed with herself for not knowing the lion's lessons quite so well as she felt she ought to have known it. This annoyance, added with the misery of being very cold and tired, made her say, "Bother the signs." She didn't quite perhaps mean it. So, putting myself in Jill's situation, yes, I could probably be the same way. Irritated at Puddleglum for bringing that up at this time. Well, all we're trying to do is get out of this blinding snowstorm. We can see the lights of Harfang in the distance. We know it's right there. Let's just get there and get in and be out of the snowstorm. Have that comfortable bed that the witch, or the woman with the green kirtle, who is the witch, promised them at the time. And just totally waylaid from their plan. Forgetting the signs and focus only on that comfort that was promised to them. The next reference that Puddleglum calls them back to the signs follows the following morning. They have gotten to Harfang. They've been able to enter. They have been given comfortable beds and good food to eat. So in the morning, Jill remembers the dream that she had in the prior night, where Aslan came to her. He showed her, go to the window. They went to the window. They looked out upon. They were in the castle of Harfang. They looked out. They could see the ruined city down below them, and down in the city, in the ruined city, there were the words "under me" written into the stone. And so they've gone to the window after they'd gotten up in the morning. Jill and Eustace and Puddleglum. And they saw the writing. And Eustace says, "We've only 4 signs to go by, and we've muffed the first 3. "You mean I have," said Jill. "It's quite true. I've spoiled everything since you brought me here. All the same, I'm frightfully sorry for all that. And all the same, what are the instructions? Under me doesn't seem to make much sense." "Yes, it does, though," said Puddleglum. "It means we've got to look for the prince under that city." "But how can we?" asked Jill. "That's the question," said Puddleglum, rubbing his hands together. "How can we now? No doubt if we'd had our minds on our job when we were down at the ruined city, we'd have been shown how, found a little door or a cave or a tunnel, met someone to help us. Might have even been, you never know, Aslan himself. We've got to get down under those paving stones somehow or other. Aslan's instructions always work. There are no exceptions." So again, Puddleglum calling them back. Jill in despair, maybe not despair, but feeling like she's utterly failed. She could have seen it then at the time, when they are down in the blinding snowstorm. But of course, in the snowstorm, she's just focused on getting to Harfang. And now, in hindsight, she sees, if we had seen that we were down in those trenches that spelled out "under me," if we had seen that, we might have been able to follow those instructions, because that was one of the signs. That Aslan said that you will see that that inscription spelled out, and you were to do as it said. And so, Jill is feeling despondent at the fact that she missed the sign. They missed the sign. But Puddleglum comes back and he encourages them. He says, Aslan's instructions always work. There are no exceptions. Yes, they missed the signs, Puddleglum admitted. They missed that sign. But just because they missed the sign doesn't mean they can't get back there. They can get back there again. Get back down to the ruined city to do what it said in the stones, "under me," to find somehow to go underneath of that city. And that is the plan, because as Puddleglum points out, Aslan's instructions always work. There are no exceptions. That's all they need to do, is to get back down there and do what that word says, because that is Aslan's instruction. Another instance of Puddleglum encouraging them again, calling them back to listening and to observing the signs. So in this instance, they have gotten down underground, gotten under the city. They've traveled for a long ways down underground, and they have met the Black Knight again, which they don't know at the time is Prince Rilian. But they met the Black Knight, and they have revealed to him that they are to look for the lost prince. Eustace is saying, "We'd been told to look for the message on the stones of the ruined city, and we saw the words 'under me.' The knight laughed even more heartily than before. "Ha! You are more deceived," he said. "Those words meant nothing to your purpose. Had you but asked my lady, you would have been given better counsel. Those are the words that is all, or for those words are all that is left of a longer script, which in ancient times, as she well remembers, expressed this verse: Though under earth and throneless now I be, yet while I lived all earth was under me. For which it's plain that some great king of the ancient giants who lived there before caused this boast to be cut in the stones over his sepulchre. And through the breaking up of some of the stones and the carrying away of others for new buildings and the filling up of the cuts with rubble has left only 2 words that can still be read. Isn't it the merriest jest in the world that you should have thought it was written just for you?" This was like cold water down the back of Jill and Scrub, for it seemed to them very likely that the words had nothing to do with their quest at all, and they had only been taken in by mere accident. So, again, so easily swayed, Jill and Eustace think, here we are trying to follow this, and it had nothing to do with us. Well, Puddleglum calls them back again. "Don't you mind him," said Puddleglum. "There are no accidents. Our guide is Aslan. And he was there when the great king caused those letters to be cut, and he already knew all things that would come of them, including this." So as Puddleglum's faith again, has called them back to the quest, back to keeping on with the quest, to following Aslan's signs. Puddleglum has that faith. He knows, he believes that they are doing what Aslan has called them to do. And just a few pages later, one of my favorite scenes in the book, when the Black Knight, who is in reality Prince Rilian, the Lost Prince, the Black Knight has said, every night, every evening I am bound to the silver chair, and I lose my senses for an hour, and I shriek, and I curse, and I wail, and I try to break my bonds. And at that point, please, whatever I do, whatever I say, don't do anything I ask you to. That's the Black Knight talking. But we know, as the story progresses, that actually the Black Knight is Prince Rilian. And in that 1 hour that he's bound to the silver chair, his true identity comes back up. His enchantment is broken for that hour. His true identity comes up. And at this point, he's calling on the children, calling on Puddleglum to release him from his bonds. "Once and for all," said the prisoner, "I adjure you to set me free, by all fears and all loves, by the bright skies of Overland, by the great lion, by Aslan himself, I charge you." "Oh," said the 3 travelers as though they had been hurt. "It's the sign," said Puddleglum. And that was the sign, the 4th sign that they were to follow. The sign said, you are to do whatever the person who asks you to do something in my name, meaning Aslan's name, you are to do what they ask you to do. And there it is, right there, the sign. It was a dreadful question. What had been the use of promising one another that they would on no account set the knight free, if they were now to do the very first thing that he happened to call upon? Well, if they were now to do the very first time he happened to call upon a name that they really cared about. On the other hand, what had been the use of learning the signs if they weren't going to obey them? And yet how could Aslan have really meant them to unbind anyone, even a lunatic, who asked it in his name? Could it be mere accident? Or how if the queen of the underworld knew all about the signs and had made the knight learn this name simply in order to entrap them? So again, the doubts come to mind. They know, at this point, the wiles of the witch. They know, how wicked and evil she is. And, the doubts are coming. They're thinking, well, maybe somehow she knew who we were. Somehow she knew the signs, and she just said, made plans. I'm going to have you call upon this name of Aslan, and that way you can destroy these children. And so they have the doubts, but Puddleglum comes back again, and brings them back to the the faith in the signs, brings them back to the dependency that they need to have on the signs and upon Aslan. "If only we knew," said Jill. "I think we do know," said Puddleglum. "Do you mean that you think everything will come all right if we untie him?" asked Scrub. "I don't know about that," said Puddleglum. "You see, Aslan didn't tell Bo what would happen. He only told her what to do. That fellow will be the death of us once he's up, I shouldn't wonder. But that doesn't let us off following the signs." So again, Puddleglum, in this scene we see how Puddleglum, his pessimism, his dire outlook on life, realizing, maybe this will even be the death of us, We've gone on this quest, there's no guarantee that we would ever survive. Even Aslan said that in the beginning, you're to go on the quest, whether you free the prince or you die in you're trying. Aslan even said that, And Puddleglum, true to that, he believes, he feels that, that it could end up in death, maybe this will be the death of them. But even so, even if that is the case, it doesn't let them off following the signs. It truly is beyond the quest at this point. Puddleglum, he admits that it's possible that they will die. They don't know that this is the prince. They maybe have a hope, an idea. But they don't know for certain whether it's the prince, and they can't be certain that they won't die. That if they do free this fellow, maybe he will end up killing them. So it is beyond the quest, because they are willing to say, Puddleglum is willing to say, it doesn't let us off following the signs. So I think Puddleglum as a character in the book is pivotal to the book, to seeing how the book unfolds, to the development of Jill and Eustace's characters as well. He's the one that keeps them back on track. He keeps them focused on Aslan, focused on following the signs to accomplishing the task that Aslan has called them to. And even just like we saw, maybe that means that maybe the task won't be accomplished, but the ultimate objective is to follow Aslan's signs. That is what Aslan has called us to do. It doesn't let us off following the signs. So for me, it's an encouraging thing, to see such a pessimistic character. A doleful outlook on life, a dire outlook, and yet Puddleglum has such faith and such confidence in Aslan and in the signs. The signs were given to Jill in person. Jill was there with Aslan. She heard the signs from his voice, from his mouth. She saw the expression on his face, as he relayed them to her. He was patient with her. He helped her work through the signs and memorize them. So she was there in person with Aslan, receiving the signs. But the interesting thing, the amazing thing, is that Puddleglum was not. He didn't get to see Aslan. He didn't hear his voice. He didn't see his face. And yet he takes those signs upon him as Aslan's true words, as the goal that Aslan has called them to. It's almost remarkable too that Puddleglum wasn't called to the quest. He just kind of showed up. The owls brought them to Puddleglum, probably thinking, here's a guy that could, to help them along their quest. And it wasn't even his quest. Aslan didn't call him, but he was willing to join alongside Aslan, to join alongside Jill and Eustace, and to take that quest upon himself, to take those signs upon himself, to have faith and confidence that those signs came from Aslan, and we can trust and depend upon them. Thank you for watching.